Invincible versus Cecil, one of if not the main topic of this entire season, with the moral debate about if criminals should have the second chance at life or if they should just be put in bars, testing Mark's morality, that type of thing. However, I'm not here to give my opinion on the morals of Cecil and Invincible and say who is wrong or right. You guys have already seen enough videos on that, and I'm way too late to make a video on that now. Plus, I don't really have an opinion I could add to that, no. Instead, I wanted to cover something completely different. With the Invincible War happening and Conquest happening next episode, a thought kept repeating in my head over and over again, and that thought was rather simple. What could Cecil have done different in order to prepare the planet better for a Viltrumite invasion and for the Invincible War? With the knowledge he had access to as well as the resources he had access to, was there any way he could have done better to prepare, or was he going to be screwed from the beginning and had to rely on Mark? Well, as you can likely tell by the fact that this video even exists, I definitely think there are ways Cecil could have prepared better. And in this video, I want to talk about those ways he could have prepared better and potentially given Earth a much better chance against the Invincible variants as well as Conquest later to come. In other words, I'm Eternal Flame, and welcome to how I would have prepared Earth for the Viltrumite War. Now, before we do go over how Cecil could have improved his defenses, I want to talk about the defenses he already has in mind. Now, number one, training Mark. That's not going to change at all, primarily because Cecil was already pushing his team to the bone and limit on what he could improve. Having to invent new inventions just for Mark to be able to increase the weight so we continue getting stronger for lifting. And because Cecil's already peaking that, there's no way to really improve that one. Instead, I want to go over to the other side of his improvements, the backup plans in case Mark fails. Or the backup plans if Mark goes evil or gets mind control or something like that and becomes a threat to the planet, basically that. Which those two things are first the access to the reanimen. Cecil has been creating an army of reanimen. From what we have seen in the show, I think it's pretty fair to say that Cecil currently has anywhere between 150 reanimen and 200 reanimen. However, there is one pretty big misconception I do want to get over immediately, which is the misconception a lot of people have that these reanimen are weaker than the one in Season 1, specifically the ones that fought against Omniman. Mainly because in this season, Mark is able to easily dismantle several of them in comparison to Omniman, who was struggling against them. However, I don't really think it's because they just got that much weaker. Instead, I think it's for three separate reasons. The first reason is pretty simple. I think Omniman genuinely underestimated the reanimen. Because the second he put more power into taking them out, he was taking them out with relative ease. However, beforehand, he was getting overwhelmed by them because he was underestimating them. Second is Mark has just gotten that much stronger. Now, I don't think Mark is currently stronger than Omniman right now, but it should be remembered, Mark in Season 3 is stronger than Anissa was. Because they're not just preparing Mark for Anissa, but they're also preparing Mark for somebody who is much worse. Not to mention the fact that when Mark's fighting against the reanimen, he is more than likely going to be feeling anger against them as well, considering what had happened previously. And as we know, anger amps Mark, as we saw several times, such as against Omniman and against the Machine Head fight. Of course, there's only so much anger can push him, but at the same time, we do know anger and adrenaline, especially adrenaline, pushes Mark much harder. And finally, the main reason why I think Mark was capable of taking out the reanimen so fast was because of the fact that he already knows how to fight them. He had to fight them before, so he had to figure out their weaknesses. The reason why I think the reanimen are just as strong is because it doesn't really make sense, at least in my opinion, for them to have gotten any weaker. Sure, they seem to be made out of a different material now, but nothing about that implies to me that they got any weaker. If anything, that might actually be implication that they got stronger because they're testing out different materials. Because I don't see why Cecil would want an army of fodder reanimen considering what the previous reanimen can do. Cecil is definitely the type to go for quality over quantity. And it's not like it's expensive to make those reanimen either. Remember, the original free reanimen that D.A. St. Clair made was inside of a sewer. So it's not like the materials are expensive or hard to find either, considering he made them inside of a sewer. And the second counter they have is the frequency weapon, the same weapon that Cecil put inside of Mark's head, as well as has littered all across the GDA in case Mark was ever to try and break in again. Now, there was also previously the Hail Mary, but the Hail Mary is now dead, so we're not going to factor that in. Or will we? Because I might have some ideas for the Hail Mary as well. But at first I want to stay with the reanimen, because there are several ways to upgrade them, several things I think Cecil should have done, and we're going to talk about those now. And up first there is the basic one, which is more the let's prevent our main weapon from turning against the GDA. Why do you have all of the reanimen still look the exact same? And you might be wondering, what do I mean by this, Mr. Eternal Flame? Well, there is a pretty easy way to make sure Mark never finds out the fact you're using reanimen, and that is putting them in the same armor that you have the GDA wear. This ends up avoiding Mark even realizing that these are reanimen. Now, of course, yes, there is the entire thing of I know Cecil doesn't want to keep this a secret, but at the same time, anyone with a brain can tell you that Mark knowing the reanimen exist, especially right now and taking that risk, is a really bad thing. Especially considering Mark's mental state at the end of the season, the fact that he's still in a pretty bad mental state from the fact he had to kill somebody previously. and the fact that he also has the stress of knowing that somebody far worse than Anissa is on the way to the planet and he needs to prepare for that. Knowing Mark's mental state and stress, I wouldn't even begin to try pushing that test onto him and pushing that ideal onto him. Then it also gives the reanimen invisibility for most people, so that actually is a pretty cool ability. But we are not done with the reanimen yet. Or rather, we're not done with how they are made yet, and this is something that has been on my mind for the longest time. Why has the method of creating a reanimen never been attempted to be replicated by Cecil? It's not like it's that hard of a method to do either. And with the supercomputers and levels of super genius you have working for the GDA, considering the level of technology we see possible with them of space travel, there is definitely somebody there, some couple of people there that could be capable of understanding how to make a reanimen and make it themselves. Especially if they record the process and eventually get D.A. Sinclair to just tell them how it's made after psychologically reconditioning him as much as they did. And I say psychologically recondition really loosely, it's more like brainwashing, primarily because of what we see with the others. And if they're capable of brainwashing and turning two people who wanted to effectively purge the world onto their side and effectively brainwashing them, they're capable of making a scientist teach them how to make reanimen. That way you can start to produce them en masse. Which is my other thing that I need to talk about. Why is there only one science wing in the GDA? Are there not underground facilities you can use in other parts of America in order to make more of these experiments? Why only have it all happen in the Pentagon? Spread out your resources and start just producing them everywhere you can. Basically, not just do I think there should be 100 or 200 reanimen, there should be thousands. Make as many as possible. And some of you guys might be wondering, okay, where are we going to get the bodies necessary to do that? Now, of course, there is the option of continuing to use American soldiers who had died in several types of battles, because there is pretty high death tolls in the world of Invincible, considering all the superheroes and monsters around, so you can just use those for reanimen, but there's also a secondary option. After all, there was a certain somebody who has access to a cloning power that has several clones across the map that have their bodies dead, and as we know, their bodies don't fade away. In fact, there are actually two people who are like that. Hello, duplicating multipole. Now, of course, yes, multipole is not really an option, primarily because of the fact that we can't really get him that easily since he works for the Order as an assassin. Duplicate, on the other hand, is pretty useful. Now, I'm not saying with the spawn camp duplicate. All I am saying is, in every single battle Duplicate is in, there is quite a lot of bodies that end up dropping that are clones of her that are still there, so just turn those into reanimen. And bam, you have even more bodies to add to this supply of reanimen you want to make to prepare for the Viltrumite Empire. But now I'm going to talk about the next body modification that I have in mind to add to the reanimen to make them even more powerful. In the Invincible War, we found out something really interesting about Rexplode. Shout out my boy, RIP, why couldn't it have been immortal? While explosions are only capable of minorly injuring Mark at first, and bigger explosions only somewhat inconvenience him, we do know if they detonate their entire skeleton, they are able to kill an Invincible variant. And not just kill, they are able to basically evaporate and incinerate their entire body. Now yes, this obviously wouldn't work on stronger Viltrumites, and this probably wouldn't even work on Season 3 Invincible. However, I do think this would do severe damage on average Viltrumites as well as just like Season 2 level Invincible people. So why not just plant that on all of the reanimen? Not just giving them an explosion range ability they could have access to, but at the same time, also giving them access to the ability to blow themselves up if they end up dying or getting compromised. And in case you're thinking, is this really an option for them? And my answer to that is yes. Remember, Rexplode's experiment was done by the government. And considering the GDA is basically the highest rank of the government in America right now, yeah, no, they should definitely have access to this experiment. So not just to give the reanimen access to a nice ranged weapon capability, because now they can launch out explosions just like Rexplode, but it also gives them access to a bomb that's likely capable of at least hurting Viltrumites, and if there's enough of them on them, that's going to take out a Viltrumite, or at least heavily damage them so your heavy hitters can come in to take out and land the final blow. And it's also pretty clear they do have some level of combat intelligence that can be programmed into them. Sure, the reanimen do fight a bit wildly, but they at the same time do have tactics. They're capable of listening and following orders as well. And speaking of, we're going to move on to the final modification that I do have in mind for the reanimen before I do move on to the next plan. And that final modification that I have in mind is pretty simple. As we know, Cecil was able to create a device that was super effective against Viltrumites based on what he had seen on Beasts in Atlantis. So let's create a miniature version of this device and put this in some of the reanimen. That way, whenever a reanimen is up against a Viltrumite, they are able to have that device be activated from a remote distance. Now, I don't think it should be automatic activation. I think activation should be based on people inside the GDA who are watching a fight happen. Primarily because automatic activation does offer way too many problems, especially if we still want to keep Invincible as an ally. But this way we can take advantage of the frequency while continuing to fight and overwhelm Viltrumites, and set them up to be wombo combo by some of our reanimen blowing up on them, and eventually we should be be able to take out a Viltrumite. Now this one does have a little bit of issues though. Unlike the previous two strategies where we can have them work alongside Invincible, if we have that happen, we do have to teleport Invincible out the way temporarily to make sure he doesn't get weakened and hurt, but at the same time, I think this is a pretty good backup plan, especially in case of Invincible losing a fight or dying. So basically, don't activate this plan unless Invincible is dead. That is the only circumstance that you can activate it. Or in case there are two Viltrumites on the planet. Two or more, you know, like a full Viltrumite invasion. After all, we never know when there could be an entire dimension of alternate reality Invincibles or just the main Viltrumite empire coming. Up next that I have in mind is a brand new program to offer some of the soups. To go to some of them and request if they want to be enhanced through cybernetics. Now of course this does have to be willingly. We can't really do this against people's will or else we're just going to be creating our own enemies. But considering what this could do for normal human level people to the point where a few of them are capable of overwhelming low-end Viltrumites, imagine what this would do for some people who have access to powers already in enhanced bodies. Not just does this give us more options to prepare for when the Viltrumites arrive, because I'm not expecting any of these to solo a Viltrumite on their own, but maybe with this advantage they should be able to offer some support in a final battle against the Viltrumite and not make us entirely have to rely on Invincible. This should also end up giving us a much better rate of taking out villains, because it's not like it's only a Viltrumite specific counter ramp. No, it can be used against all people. The only part that can't would be the frequency part, which I wouldn't give to the superheroes that are volunteering for this anyway. And in case you're wondering, does the GTA have the money to fuel all of the experiments? And in my opinion, yes, it does. After all, maybe we just have to cut back on how much somebody uses the teleporter, which costs $7.6 billion every time they use it. Or maybe Cecil does need that teleporter. Maybe he does need to move from place to place quickly, and his old legs won't just take him there anymore like a normal person. Instead, we have a different method. There's a certain somebody who can create resources, and you can likely pay a lesser amount than what you'd have to pay a country to get those resources if you're running low. You don't even need to explain to Adam Eve why you need the resources, just tell her, hey, this is to better help save the planet, or this is just to help better prepare themselves for Viltrumites, or you just tell her this is to help prepare Mark's training even better. Which doesn't even have to be a lie. There are certainly some things Adam Eve can help do with Mark's training in order to make it better. Let's push some limits, let's see what people are capable of doing. After all, Cecil had to start pushing his scientist team in order to make things that were heavier than what the Earth had to offer for Mark to lift. Yet as we know, Adam Eve should be able to create anything, right? So why not test if she can create some heavy things for Mark to be able to lift? Now up next I have some future plans which we're not going to incorporate now because there's not enough time to, but this is more so because of what we saw happen when all of the heroes were kidnapped in the center of the globe. As a result, there were insanely durable centipedes that were able to take several hits from Mark. Now of course they did eventually die, but they were able to take hits from Mark. So let's teleport some of those up to the surface and see if we can replicate their scales. Add them to armor to either give the reanimen or just your own soldiers more durable armor, or just add them to technology in general. See if you can replicate what they are made of and use that to your advantage in order to better prepare your own forces. They've already shown to be pretty effective against somebody you think is capable of beating Anissa now. Now of course Mark was still holding back, but still that is kind of something that's rather important to note. However, there are some other things that Cecil does have access to that he should be using more. One of the big things that Cecil has access to is the quantum chip that Machine Head was using, which allowed him to predict not just Invincible coming, but also all the Guardians coming when they did. Use that to your advantage. Use that to predict whether some experiments are going to be successes or not. That way some time and resources doesn't have to be wasted on failed experiments. And upgrade it to see if they can predict even further in the future than you already have. Maybe this could help with predictions like the Invincible War coming or Conquest coming, so you can know when attacks are about to come and you can prepare as best as you can with resources set up in that general area. And now I do have one more plan in mind. One more plan that I actually think should have been done, and I'm really surprised Cecil didn't even try this in canon. Rehabilitating and using the Mauler Twins to their advantage. Now yes, I do know in Season 3 Oliver kills the Mauler Twins. But it should be remembered, Cecil had them in prison for a season before. So use that to your advantage, especially considering how intelligent the Mauler Twins actually are. And if I'm being honest, they're easier to redeem than D.A. Sinclair is. Because I need to say this, the Mauler Twins are smart. They are smart as hell. And if I'm being honest, out of all of the characters introduced in Invincible Season 1 through 3, only the TV show, I would honestly argue the Mauler Twins are either the smartest or second behind Robot out of all of the introduced characters. Maybe Action Levy too, but I'm not too certain about that one. Because not just are they able to create something that can replicate entire bodies, so that's really good, but they can also replicate entire brains of different people and upload that knowledge into the body. and the ability to put 100 or over 100 separate people's knowledge into one brain and still keep them as the same. It should be remembered, the only reason Angstrom Levy ended up being the way he was because he screwed up the experiment and made it explode. It was going to work originally. So you might be wondering, why is this knowledge of them being able to clone things super important? Well, there are a couple reasons why, at least in my opinion. Or well, not a couple, just one. One of the big things that Earth has to its disadvantage right now is the fact they only have one Viltrumite there. Now yes, that Viltrumite is your strongest protector, but you only have one of them. And I think you know where I'm going with this. Let's copy either Mark's body or Nolan's body, because I guarantee there is some DNA left from either of them, especially Mark, of how often he gets into fights and beaten up, and there are probably just several opportunities to get Mark's DNA that you can get him to give you in Season 2 or Season 3 during the training. Make a clone of Mark or Omniman's body, and then upload one of your soldiers or maybe even you yourself's brain into them in order to have a second body that can assist you in fighting. Or can assist Mark in fighting, giving you 2 Viltrumites instead of 1 to fight against whichever Viltrumite comes. Now I'm not saying we should create an army of Viltrumites, because that is an issue waiting to happen. Even if they all have brains you can guarantee are loyal to you, that is an issue waiting to happen that I don't think should happen for anyone, but at least create one or a couple if you can get the Mauler Twins working for you. And so the Mauler Twins are pure evil people who just want the absolute destruction of the world. It is pretty clear all they're after is conquest and money. All they want to do is rule and have money and have freedom. And if we are willing to offer redemption and a better chance to D.A. Sinclair, who I will eternally argue is significantly worse as a person than the Mauler Twins, why not give that chance to the somewhat better Mauler Twins? Like, sure, yeah, they're evil, but they aren't, like, so bad they don't deserve a better chance. Especially with how useful their knowledge would have been during the Invincible War. You know what? Actually, he wants to send to our dimension and the main Mark's not helping because Adam Eve is in the hospital? Fine, 2 can play a that game. Have our own. You want it? Or I'll bring you an war. Now, of course, the hardest part about this plan is getting the Mauler Twins on our side, but I'm going to be honest, I think it's a lot easier than some people think. Now, of course, there is also the issue of if Mark finds out about the fact that we have Invincible clones, he's definitely going to be mad about that, but at the same time, that can be handled. Just have them wear different uniforms and make them not noticeable. Make them wear full uniforms and not show off any parts of their face. And now, rather than using that giant you used in order to spar against Mark, you have a pretty even sparring partner for him, which both will improve off of. And I'm just saying, if the Mauler Twins are able to get the resources they need to do cloning on their own with random commission jobs, the military will be able to do it for them too. Alright, so while I said the Mauler Twin plan was my most out there plan, now we're going to move on to what I consider my actual most out there plan. However, I'm just doing this because I want to have fun. As we know, the Hail Mary is an incredibly strong beast. After it was juiced up with every single drug and enhancement that it had, it was able to go pretty even with Omniman for a while. But now it's dead. However, there is a potential way to get around this. If their remains are still around, maybe, just maybe, the Mauler Twins might be able to duplicate that too. Now, I don't really know if it's possible to replicate the Hail Mary or not, but it is still a rather useful beast to have around, considering it was much more effective than even the reanimen. Especially if you can modify it with that frequency in mind that's super effective against Viltrumites. And these are the main plans that I have in mind for how Cecil could have prepared the Earth better for a Viltrumite invasion. But now I'm curious what you guys think in the comment section down below, though do remember there is one specific limit that I have on this. The plans must happen after Omniman leaves the planet. Basically, you have access to all the knowledge and resources that Cecil would have at that point, and he's slowly going to get more and more resources, but that's what you have access to at the time. But I'm curious what changes you would make as Cecil. How would you prepare the Earth better? Do you think my plans have any holes in them? Do you think any of my plans wouldn't work? I'm curious to see down below.